I would expect that a goodly number of states will say, whoever the Democratic candidate is, you're off the ballot, and others, for the Republican candidate, you're off the ballot, and it'll come down to just a handful of states that are going to decide the presidential election.
I think that the question that you have to confront is why a single state should decide who gets to be president of the United States.
Today at the Supreme Court, the 9 justices heard oral argument in a historic case about whether the insurrection clause of the Constitution disqualifies former President Donald Trump from appearing on the primary ballot in Colorado. Tonight, we want to get your reaction to the case. Here's how you can join the conversation. Republicans, 202-748-8921. Democrats, 202-748-8920. All others, dial in at 202-748-8922. Voters in Colorado, we want to hear from you at 202-748-8923. You can also join us on X with the handle @CSPAN or on Facebook.com/CSPAN. Start dialing in now. We'll pick up the conversation in just a minute. We're going to take it until about 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. And at that point, we'll hit the rewind button and show you the oral argument in its entirety. Now, at the center of this case is interpretation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Here's a bit from that part of the Constitution. No person shall be a member in Congress or elector of President and Vice President who, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same. Joining us this evening is Mark Walsh, a writer for SCOTUS blog. He was in the courtroom today. Why does this case center around Section 3 of the 14th Amendment?
Well, good evening, Greta. That's the section that the voters in Colorado, the group of 6 voters, seized on to try to knock Donald Trump off the primary ballot there. And this section has not been used in a presidential election before, but there's been some scholarly work about it, particularly since last year. An influential law review article was published by two conservatives who urged their conclusion after researching this, that this could be done and should be done because they believed that President Trump had engaged in insurrection. And so that's where we are now.
What were the justices saying? What types of questions were they asking revolving around the 14th Amendment, Section 3?
So it's very interesting because, this came up kind of quickly and was put on the docket quickly by the court with the belief that they need to sort of address this because one state did disqualify Donald Trump. Other states have reached the opposite conclusion or not disqualified him on technical reasons, and other states are considering this. And so I think the court felt it was important. And there are many sort of complex questions that are embedded in this case. But what was clear from the beginning was that the court was not going to engage sort of the basic question, did Donald Trump engage in insurrection? They were kind of going to work on the margins of some of the other more complicated issues first and last.
It was an hour before that very question came up, and it was asked by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson to the former president's lawyer. What is the likelihood, after listening to more than 2 hours today of this oral argument, that the former president remains disqualified on the primary ballot in Colorado?
Well, the likelihood that he remains disqualified is quite low because I certainly agree, and most of my reporter colleagues and others who watch this argument or listen to it on the live stream agree that that's not where the court is going. and it may be unanimous, maybe lopsided. That's not the direction the court is heading to. They're going to, in some way or another, overturn this Colorado Supreme Court decision.
How soon could the court make a decision?
So that's a good question. This case has been compared to Bush versus Gore, which has involved the 2000 presidential election that was so close and that came down to Florida. And the court took a while before it got involved, but then decided it needed to resolve the thing pretty quickly and heard arguments one day. It did hear arguments in a sort of separate side issue first, but when it heard Bush versus Gore, it heard arguments one day and decided the case the next day. That's not going to happen here. There's not quite that urgency, but I think they will strive to resolve it quickly. We're not going to be waiting till the end of June. It's more likely, one date that looms is the March 5th super primary date, or Super Tuesday date that includes Colorado's primary. Former President Trump is on the ballot while these proceedings this ruling was stayed, but that's one possibility, is to try and get it out by then.
Mark Walsh with SCOTUS blog. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Now let's turn to all of you and get your thoughts on this Supreme Court case today. Trump v. Anderson. Those are the lines on your screen. Ed is in Belleville, Illinois. Ed, let's hear from you first.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I found some of Justice Roberts' questioning in this oral argument to be really almost silly. Suggesting that red states are going to just knock Democrats off the ticket and blue states are going to do the same. There has to be proof that the candidate engaged in insurrection or gave aid and comfort to an insurrection before they can do any of that. So is the Chief Justice suggesting that these states were just going to willy-nilly not follow the law at all and just randomly start knocking candidates off the ballots? I think that's a false premise, and I don't think it was. I would like to hear how the lawyers answered some of these questions, and not just hear what the question was that the justice asked. So That was my comment.
Yeah, well, and you can do that, certainly. If you go to our website, cspan.org, you can watch this case in its entirety, hear the justices ask their question, and hear the lawyers respond. You can also find it on our free mobile app, C-SPAN Now. Download it to your phone. If you don't have time, though, to listen through 2 hours plus of today's oral argument, if you go to YouTube and also on our website, you'll find C-SPAN's Short Take. It's a compilation of all the key moments, and one of them is that question that Chief Justice Roberts asks to the lawyers representing Norma Anderson, the 90-year-old Republican, former lawmaker of Colorado, and some Colorado voters who brought this case before the Supreme Court. Let's go next to Suzanne in Castle Rock, Colorado. Suzanne, a voter from Colorado, what do you think should happen here?
Hello?
Hi, Suzanne, it's your turn. Can you mute your television?
Oh, sure.
All right, tell us, as a Colorado voter, what do you want to happen in your state?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I hope they vote 9-0.
Okay, 9-0 what?
9-0 for Trump.
Okay, Suzanne. Robin in Rothbury, Michigan. Robin.
Hi. Yes, I can.
Hi, Robin. Go ahead.
I would like to say, why would it be allowed for any candidate to be removed from a ballot on hearsay, and that former President Trump was never convicted of any crime? So why is it valid to remove his name as a candidate from the presidential run when the American people wanted to vote for him? And why would this be it would be like a slap in the face for the Constitution? And wouldn't it be considered tampering with the election? And I feel that to me is what would you consider like above the law? Like what would be the definition as far as, like, to me, our definition of the law would be to follow the law of the Constitution, and I feel that their definition would be like their law is they're making their own laws as they go along. I just really feel that that with him not doing a crime, I don't feel there is no insurrection.
Okay. All right. We heard that, Robin. We heard that. And just a reminder to you and others, you got to mute your television. Otherwise, we hear you, but we also hear the feedback from your television, and it makes it difficult. Reuters Legal sending this tweet out about the oral argument today. SCOTUS justices appeared skeptical toward a judicial decision kicking former President Donald Trump off the ballot in Colorado for participating in an insurrection during the 2021 Capitol attack in a case with major implications for the November election. And then you also had this from Lyle Denniston, a longtime watcher of the court, often foolish to predict how the Supreme Court will rule on a big case. Not so today, he writes. The Trump disqualification case is over. Might even be ending 8-1, if not 9-0. Justices came to the bench with their minds mostly made up. His analysis, Trump is very likely to stay on the ballot. And then you have Lawrence Hurley, who is a legal analyst for NBC, writing, knew the Supreme Court spent 2 hours weighing whether Trump should be kicked off the ballot, but barely touched upon a key issue. Was January 6th actually an insurrection? And there is also this tweet from Stephen Mazie, who covers the court for The Economist, sending out this tweet just out of the oral argument in Trump v. Anderson. Trump is staying on the ballot, folks, and the decision may well be unanimous. And I'll just end with this from Jonathan Turley, a conservative legal analyst at George Washington University. The argument is now over. The disqualification advocates may have expected a cold reception, but this was perfectly glacial. Nobody, some of the toughest and the most skeptical, notably, he said, some of the toughest and most skeptical questions came from the left of the court. Myra in Louisville, Tennessee. Let's go to you.
Yes.
Hi, Myra. Mute your television for me, all right?
Okay.
All right. Now we're going to listen to you. Go ahead.
Yes. I'm with Colorado. I don't think he need to be on the ballot because I don't think it's fair. If he did that on January the 6th, I really don't think he need to be running for president because no telling what would happen if he gets back into the White House. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
All right, Myra. We'll go to Rogo, Amsterdam, New York. Rogo?
Yes.
Good evening. Go ahead. What are your thoughts on this case? Did you get to listen today?
Yes, it's very hard to take him off the ballot. And as bad as it was when they took Mr. Santos and removed him, I mean, he was never accused of anything either, or not found guilty of anything. I mean, it's up to the American people to vote, not for courts to decide who they can vote for or can't vote against. To me, it's all politically related. Republicans against Democrats, whatever. That's all. This whole thing seems to be over. They just want him off the ballot. And other than that, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, that's what Justice Kavanaugh asked of the lawyers who brought this case against the president. Justice Kavanaugh saying, are you disenfranchising voters who want to support the former president? Again, if you missed any of today's oral argument, you can find it on our website, cspan.org. You'll find points of interest on the video player when you hit the playhead. That'll bring you to different questions from the justices. You'll also, on our free mobile app, C-SPAN Now, be able to watch the entire case. And on those platforms, along with YouTube, you can find C-SPAN's Short Take. It's a compilation of all of the key moments from today's case. And again, here in a little bit on C-SPAN, we are going to show you the entire oral argument from earlier today. In the meantime, we're getting your reaction to what you heard from the justices and the lawyers in the courtroom today. Bradley in Los Angeles, let's hear from you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I actually am a constitutional lawyer here in Los Angeles. And I don't believe that the Supreme Court is going to make a decision to keep Trump off the ballot. And I do believe it's a state's decision to be left alone, and that this is the type of case that a Supreme Court will deny touching. So I doubt that they'll kick him off the ballot.
Well, what does that mean then? I mean, Colorado has just said that he's disqualified to be on the ballot. Now, the ballots in that state went out with his name on it because this case was brought before the Supreme Court. But the question is, do they count those ballots, those that voted for the president, in their primary on March 5th? What are you saying the Supreme Court's going to say on that question?
I think the Supreme Court is going to allow those ballots to be counted, but I think that they should respect the highest court of each state's decision on that issue.
All right. Let's go back to today and listen to the Chief Justice, John Roberts, in his questioning of the lawyer representing some of the Colorado voters and Norma Anderson, who brought this case up, trying to get the former president disqualified from the primary ballot.
I would expect that a goodly number of states will say whoever the Democratic candidate is, you're off the ballot, and others, for the Republican candidate, you're off the ballot. And it'll come down to just a handful of states that are going to decide the presidential election. That's a pretty daunting consequence.
Well, certainly, Your Honor, the fact that there are potential frivolous applications of a constitutional provision isn't a reason.
Well, no, hold on. I mean, you might think they're frivolous, but probably the people who are bringing them may not think they're frivolous. Insurrection is a broad term, and if there's some debate about it, I suppose that will go into the decision, and then eventually what we would be deciding whether there was an insurrection when one president did something as opposed to when somebody else did something else. And what do? Do we wait until near the time of counting the ballots and sort of go through which states are valid and which states aren't?
There's a reason Section 3 has been dormant for 150 years, and it's because we haven't seen anything like January 6th. Since Reconstruction. Insurrection against the Constitution is something extraordinary.
Chief Justice John Roberts, several court observers pointing to that question from today's oral argument today, saying that the Chief Justice has tipped his hat on how he would rule on this decision. Lewis in Denver, Colorado, let's go to you. Lewis, what do you think should happen in your state here?
I think it's terrible. I read about Venezuela and Russia kicking the opposition off their ballots and think to myself, what terrible countries. We're so lucky to live in the United States. But then this happened, and I think we're no different from them. And they have arguments that the opposition violated the Constitution and therefore can't run. And I think this, is a throwback, huge voter suppression, but back to the South, before Martin Luther King, of just how to prevent African Americans from voting because a candidate will win. Thank you.
All right. Kristen in Hillsdale, Michigan. Kristen.
It's me, Christine?
Yes, it's you. Christine, go ahead.
I heard President Biden say that he wanted him to stay on the ticket, and I think he should too, so that people, if they want to vote for him, they can.
You don't think it should be the Supreme Court that makes that type of decision?
Well, I watched the whole thing, but I don't think it should have ever been sent to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
I just don't think that the Colorado lady should have took it off. I think it should have been left on.
All right, understood. Mary in Winchester, California. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
We're listening to you. We're listening to you. Go ahead.
Yes, I think that it's a shame that I would like to see Trump on the ballot, but I think he should be on the ballot because he did incite insurrection. And we saw it on January 6th for ourselves. And the Supreme Court is going to make their own decision, but mine personally says put him on the ballot. Let's see if he gets voted for or not. But but make sure that. I think the biggest problem is this has never come up before. But now that it has, it should be addressed as he should not be on the ballot, even though I would like to see him on the ballot.
All right, Mary. Got it. Politico did a profile piece on the 90-year-old woman who brought this case, Norma Anderson. She's quoted as saying, "When duty calls, you do it." Norma Anderson, a lifelong Republican who rose through the state party to become one of the top GOP lawmakers in Colorado, said she immediately agreed to participate when recruited by an attorney working with the liberal government watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, D.C. Anderson is part of a small group of former Republican elected officials who have pushed to use the courts to disqualify Mr. Trump from the ballot. A dozen former Republican members of Congress and 3 former Republican governors filed briefs with the Supreme Court urging the justices to side with Anderson and keep Trump off the ballot, with almost no current or former Democratic officials weighing in publicly in legal filings. Let's hear next from Dan in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hi, Dan.
Hello, thanks for having me. Well, it's an interesting voting referendum in terms of you see a lot of the liberal influx that's come to Colorado, a lot of the California voters, and it's just worrisome if you think that those newer Colorado voting people don't want him on the ballot. So I have mixed feelings on it overall. I really felt like they did dismiss the insurrection piece of it as well. So I have mixed feelings, but it's interesting. And I think the other caller said it best. Just let him be on the ballot and see what the people decide. And
All right. Well, Dan, you may be interested in the questioning from Justice Elena Kagan. Let's listen to what she said today in the oral argument.
I think that the question that you have to confront is why a single state should decide who gets to be president of the United States. In other words, this question of whether a former president is disqualified for insurrection to be president again is, just say it. It sounds awfully national to me. So whatever means there are to enforce it would suggest that they have to be federal, national means. Why does, if you weren't from Colorado and you were from Wisconsin or you were from Michigan, and it really, what the Michigan Secretary of State did is going to make the difference between, whether candidate A is elected or candidate B is elected. I mean, that seems quite extraordinary, doesn't it?
No, Your Honor, because ultimately it's this court that's going to decide that question of federal constitutional eligibility and settle the issue for the nation. And certainly it's not unusual that questions of national importance come up.
Well, I suppose this court would be saying something along the lines of that a state has the power to do it. But I guess I was asking you to go a little bit further and saying, why should that be the right rule? Why should a single state have the ability to make this determination, not only for their own citizens, but for the rest of the nation?
Because Article 2 gives them the power to appoint their own electors as they see fit. But if they're going to use a federal constitutional qualification as a ballot access determinant, then it's creating a federal constitutional question that then this court decides, and other courts, other states, if this court affirms the decision below, determining that President Trump is ineligible to be president, other states would still have to determine what effect that would have on their own state's law.
The Supreme Court today hearing the case Trump v. Anderson about whether or not the Colorado ballot, primary ballot, should have the former president's name on it, and the case centering around the 14th Amendment, Section 3, the insurrection clause of the Constitution. We're getting your reaction to the case this evening, and we're going to re-air it in its entirety coming up here on C-SPAN. Vic in Martinsburg, West Virginia, what do you think?
I think it should be left on the ballot. No state should be able to say you can't run. If that's the case, if they're allowed to do that, then Texas, Florida, every Republican state should say Biden should be able to run for the insurrection at the border. That's a bigger insurrection than what we had in D.C. In D.C., there was not one weapon there. The only person that got shot was shot by a cop, not shot by somebody that was there. And Trump told them to go peacefully and patriotically to protest. And Republicans do it peacefully and privately. and patriotically, why the Democrats burn cities, but that's okay. That's not insurrection. So I think that they should leave Trump on the ballot.
All right. Well, the former president talked about what he had said on January 6th today when at Mar-a-Lago he went before reporters to give his reaction to the oral argument. Here's what he had to say.
If you take a look at my words right after, you take a look at my speech from the Rose Garden, which was very shortly after, or you take a look at I'm only on Truth now, but at that time we were tweeting and I was on Twitter. If you take a look at those 5 or 6 tweets, you will see very beautiful, very heartwarming statements. Go home, the police are doing their job, etc., etc. Beautiful statements. If you see my statement made in the Rose Garden, I think you have to watch that.
Former president in Florida today reacting to the Supreme Court oral argument. He there was talking about his remarks on January 6, 2021. If you want to watch those in their entirety, you can find them in our archives. Go to cspan.org. And in our search engine, you can put in the former president's name or search in another way, and you will find it, and you will be able to watch every word that he said in that speech on the ellipse that day. Susan in Westlake, Ohio. Hi, Susan.
Hi. I think that I think that the Supreme Court should affirm Colorado's Supreme Court decision to leave Trump off of the ballot because because we have a Constitution for a reason, and the Constitution cites insurrection, and he participated in the insurrection for sure, and the only other time that the Insurrection Act has been used, the people who were prevented from being in office after the Civil War because of the Insurrection Act were not convicted of anything either. And so Trump does not need to be convicted to be prevented. And I think he should be kept off the ballot. And nationally, if people want to vote for him, they can write it in.
So did you listen closely today? It sounds like you did.
I listened a little bit.
Okay, because your Civil War reference, that was brought up in today's case.
Yeah, well, that's been talked about a lot in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Susan, thank you. In Ohio, Joseph in Kersey, Pennsylvania. Hi, Joseph.
Hey, Joe, you're on. Joe.
Joseph, someone's prompting you. It's your turn.
My turn. All right. My question is, say he loses the ballot, can he go back and bitch about Colorado saying that he wasn't on the vote that took votes away from me? What happens about that?
All right. Well, what do you think should happen?
I think if you voted, it should be counted. It seems like they're taking votes away from people. They say get out there and vote. Now they're saying, well, if you write down anything, you're not going to get your vote counted.
All right,
That's
Joseph.
the way I'm looking at it.
Okay, Joseph in Pennsylvania, you will be our last for this evening. The conversation will pick up tomorrow on the Washington Journal, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for joining us tonight. Now we'll take you back to earlier today when the Supreme Court heard this oral argument in Trump v. Anderson in its entirety right here on C-SPAN.